And following the meeting on cable channel 10 HD 1090. Public comment is not normally taken at workshop meetings, although the council may allow or request public participation on action items. We have no action items on our agenda today. Welcome all to our first workshop of the new year. Thank you to Mayor Pro Tem Heisen for presiding over last week's council meeting while I was out ill. I'll ask us to please be mindful of our time today, as myself and other staff members will be attending the first community catch-up meeting at 6 p.m. this evening at the center. This is an opportunity for the city to host casual conversations with partners, local leaders, and groups. Joining us this evening are representatives from the Oak Harbor Public Schools, the Oak Harbor Boys and Girls Club, and our Oak Harbor Parks and Recreation Department. I would also like to finalize who from council is attending the National League of Cities Conference March 10th through the 12th, and who will be attending the Pentagon and meeting with legislators with City Administrator Combs and myself on March 13th and 14th. We have budgeted for no more than 2 of you to go. At the January 21st council meeting, Councilmember Wiesner said he wished to attend, and Councilmember Stuckey wanted to know for certain whether appointments were confirmed before deciding. We are still in the process of obtaining Pentagon and legislative appointments, so that is not completely ironed out at this time. If no one wishes to attend the NLC conference itself, then we won't rush to meet the deadline for early discounted registration. With that, I will turn it over to City Council for their comments at this time. Councilmember Stuckey.
Just to be clear, were you looking for an answer to your question, or is it?
It's just something for us to discuss today. I mean,
is it a discussion item at some point, or is this?
No, I mean just for us to discuss before we all.
Just speaking for me personally,
yeah.
I don't necessarily need to go to the National League of Cities conference.
Okay.
And for me personally, I would certainly like to attend the Pentagon meeting and the meeting with the legislators. And thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah.
As the new guy council member, I'm quite fast for now.
Hit your mic.
As the new guy council member, I'm going to pass on this for now. I'm learning curve going on.
Understood. Anything? Yes.
I'm probably going to attend the one in June at Kennewick,
Okay.
so I'm probably going to go there.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Heisen has her hand raised.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, when we talked about this at the last meeting, the overall feel was not real, nobody was chomping at the bit to go to the actual National League of Cities conference, but there were several of us that were available and able to go to DC for the meetings. So, and I would be happy to go. I went last year, so if Councilor Stuckey or somebody else wants to go, that's fine. But if we need somebody, I would be happy to go. And so when you do get all of our meetings scheduled and those appointments made, maybe just check back in with us about what that, logistically is going to look like. But yeah, I'm not sure any of us are interested in actually attending the conference, so we can not worry about the registration for that.
Perfect, yeah. So we're working to try to get those firmed up this week. It's trying to get all of the calendars lined up in DC. And it looks like either way, it will for sure be the 2 days, the 13th and the 14th, that we would do the legislation meetings as well as the Pentagon visit. So,
yeah, just keep us posted on how that's going.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Everyone else is good? All right, hearing nothing else, we will move on to the first item on our agenda, which is the monthly departmental report from the city administrator. And here to talk about that is our city administrator, Sabrina Combs.
Okay.
I can't hear anything.
Sorry, we're just waiting to load, Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Good afternoon, council and mayor. So, couple of items I'm just going to go over. You had the report in the packet. A little bit of a network issue. There we go. Okay, thank you, Tim. So, first off, we have, sorry, the clicker's a little slow on me. So, we have some standard projects that we've been working on as a city, the marina and our next steps, so we appreciate you working with us on that. We have the comp plan, community events and partnerships, construction projects, and then master fee updates. So some of the key highlights we're focusing on. Tim, can you just progress the slide by 2? Is it stuck? Oh, maybe not. Okay, then I'm just going to keep going. Sorry about the technical issues there. So, next slide. For joint meeting with Island County, that's an upcoming item. It's February 11th at 2:30 p.m. at Island County. This is for the county commissioners and the city council to talk about the comp plan. So we're excited to have that meeting, and we hope you all participate in that. Then the next slide is community outreach. We have been working on several things to engage with the public more, and that's some of our priorities. So we have the right blend. The first one was in January. We had lots of great conversations at Mad Batter about the different things going on at the city. The mayor and I were able to engage with the public, answer their questions, and it was really fun to talk with some of our folks in the downtown community about what's going on. The other is the next one is going to be scheduled for Would Be Coffee on February 22nd, and that's the Would Be Coffee on State Route 20. Then we have the community catch-up tonight. We're very excited. It's a theme around our schools and our youth, so we are excited to talk with the public about that. And we have some organizations joining us, so they will also be sharing some of their information. And then I have personally attended the MLK event that was at House of Prayer, and that was fantastic to be with the community and celebrate and remember Martin Luther King Jr. And then I also participated this last weekend with some of you at the Winter Stroll in downtown. And Main Street got really lucky because it was a beautiful day. The sun was out and everybody was walking around and really engaging with our business community, and it was really fun to see some of the activities and items that they had from their stores. So I got a couple of fun items while I was there. Then the advisory boards, staff is continuing to work on your request from the workshop in October. So we did complete the planning commission, and we're next going to be working on the salary commission and the lodging tax advisory, so that those can be updated, and our records management team is working on those. Then we're also scheduling some joint meetings with the council during future workshops so that they can sit down with the advisory board groups. And then information technology, as we know, technology, we're having a little bit of an issue right now. Staff is working with our new vendor, Kelly Create, on some of those items. We're also planning for an upgrade to the ERP system and working on some IT policies. So we recently had a server upgrade, and staff has been working through some of those with the changes. So let me know if you had any questions. Those are just a couple of highlights.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Stuckey.
Yeah, I noticed a new item in the report, and you can never have too much information. The code compliance
Yes.
document. I don't know how everyone else feels about, I like it, but having the exact address on there, I mean, maybe the street, I mean, if you're their neighbor, you probably already know, but I don't know if I like having the exact address on there.
No, that's fair, and
Personally.
we can make adjustments to it. Due to some recent conversations around code compliance, we wanted to provide the community with a better understanding of what's happening with some of those requests and reports that we receive.
Yeah, and I think it's wonderful to give kind of an overview of what kind of code compliance, but I don't know if the exact address needs to
will
be
work on
placed
that.
on there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Stuckey. Yes, Councilmember Wittgenstein, did you have a question? Nope. Anybody else? Great, thank you, Sabrina.
Sure thing, thank you.
Next up is Development Services, and here to talk about Development Services and update on code compliance and fence regulations is Director David Cool. Ray Heltzley, I didn't see you over there. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about code compliance and fence heights, as well as other fence details. Looks like we're working now. There it is. Fantastic. So first, Ray Helsley will be presenting on code compliance issues, and then I'll follow up with fence height regulations. A little bit about what you just talked about, Councilman Stuckey. What you probably saw was a code compliance tracking sheet that we use to track all the detail. We can certainly modify that however you want to see it in a report. So Ray will be available to work on that. So there you go, sir. There's your button.
That one there?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I understand you people are interested in how I do my job. So I prepared a few comments. You might be interested in knowing that there was no code enforcement officer in the city of Oak Harbor until 2004. I am the first person that has ever been hired as the code enforcement officer. And when I was hired, I was told that they had no idea how to tell me how to do my job, read the job description, and figure it out from there. Phil Blyle was the city attorney at the time, and under his guidance, we put together some procedures that seemed to work for us. Basically, we were making sure that we adhered to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the procedural law. As a retired police officer, I was used to the idea of doing my job with the least amount of force necessary to get the job done. And I carried that philosophy over into code enforcement. I don't use force as a code enforcement officer, fortunately, but I am interfering with people's private lives, and the philosophy is to enter the enforcement continuum at the lowest possible level that would obtain compliance and have the least amount of effect on the citizens. Now, each of you have been given a copy of the procedures as I follow them. So if you want to just follow along with me, feel free to stop me at any point if you have questions, or if I'm just boring you and you want me to stop. Okay, I can be made aware of a complaint or code violation in a number of ways. The city has a pre-printed code violation complaint form that citizens can fill out and submit either in person or on the internet. They may also contact me in person, by phone, or by email. Once I'm made aware of a complaint, the process is pretty simple. I go to the location where the violation is occurring and confirm whether it is or is not actually a code violation. Once I decide that, yes, this is a valid violation, then I will start the documentation. Get a picture of it, make sure that, yes, it is in the city limits. It's a violation of this particular code. Do this by visiting the violation site. Then I will determine who the responsible party is and make them aware of the violation. This can be done by personal contact at the time of the visit to the violation site or by written notification. Then I will document the violation by assigning it a case number, create a case file that will contain all the pertinent information about the violation, and begin a narrative, which is an open form on in the case file where I document the progression of the violation and the actions that are taken to evade it. The initial notice of violation gives the person a 10-day period to either correct the violation or respond and advise me of what their plan and timetable is for correcting the violation. If the 10 days has gone by and there's either been no contact with the violator or I have not received some kind of information from them about their plan and their timetable to abate the violation, then I will send them a second notice. Once they respond to the second notice, then the procedure is the same. Open a narrative, explain in my report what steps are being taken or will be taken, and follow it through to completion. If there's no response to the second notice, then I will issue what's known as a final notice and order. This is a little more formal, and it contains warnings to the violator as to what the consequences could be of not abating the violation. You can see on the handout all the information that's required in that notification. Boils down to the if the violator takes no action from that point after the expiration of the time limit given, then the city can actually step in and abate the violation itself, and then charge the responsible party for whatever the cost is. Just for your information, we very seldom have to go to that point. Once the case is finished, the situation has been resolved, then I will complete my report, close the case, and submit my report to the supervisor for their approval before filing. Mr. Blyle, when he hired me and told me there's no, we don't know what to tell you what to do or how to do your job, and there's no academy for code enforcement officers, I started working on coming up with a manual for how to do the job consistently, so that I would be consistent with my performance, and whoever replaced me would have the benefit of my experience, and eventually produced a procedure manual that incorporates all the correct procedures that should be taken in order to do code enforcement. It might interest you to know that I was invited by the Washington Association of Code Enforcement Officers several years ago to present this manual at a state conference, and about 30 officers from different cities and counties asked for copies of it, and they now use my manual as the basis for how they do code enforcement in their jurisdictions. So it's pretty much a tried and true system. I've been doing it now for 20 years as of last November. Again, the philosophy has been to be as user-friendly, customer-friendly as possible, to work with the people that are responsible for the violation, and basically help them resolve the violation without having to be given a notice of infraction, which would result in paying a fine. It's pretty self-explanatory that they're better off using their money to fix the violation than they are to pay the fine, because they have to, even if they pay the fine, they still have to abate the violation. And I have explained that to a number of people, to the point where sometimes I've actually had to ask them, please don't make me write you a ticket. In the 6 years that I have records for this particular phase of the code enforcement, I've only had to write one ticket. Never had to go beyond that, except in one case where the city did have to step in and do some abasement, and then we placed a lien against the property. That's basically resulted in a history of compliance. I have a 98.4% compliance rate that pretty much stays consistent month to month. Also, the code enforcement operation in the city of Oak Harbor is complaint-driven. I am a part-time staff. I work 15 hours a week as a code enforcement officer, and so I don't spend my time driving around looking for violations. I work with violations that are reported to me. I'm not prohibited from initiating my own investigation or of violations. I can't help seeing them as I drive around doing my job, so I do from time to time instigate a complaint myself, but the main focus is complaint-driven. And most jurisdictions' code enforcement programs are complaint-driven for whatever reason. One thing I want to clear up is people use some terms kind of interchangeably. They use the term citation, notification, notice, ticket, and those words actually have specific connotations in the enforcement world. I do not issue citations. If I issue something that has a monetary penalty on it, it's called a notice of infraction. The notice of violation is just the informal courtesy letter that a violator receives when I notify them of the violation. So it sounds almost like notice of infraction, but it's a courtesy letter. It doesn't cost them anything, just lets them know what's going on and what they have to do. A citation is actually issued by the police department for a criminal traffic offense or a misdemeanor criminal violation. So just to clear that up. I think that's all I have to say. Any questions?
Councilmember Wiesner.
Yeah, I just have a comment. Hopefully you didn't really come here with the impression that we want to know how you're doing your job, because quite frankly, every year you've made presentations to us. You've been very clear as to your success rate, and I just want to make sure you're not here with the impression that, maybe I'm not speaking for the rest of the council, but I certainly have no question about the work you've done for us, Ray, and we appreciate your long service here with the city and the work you do. It's a very gentle stuff you do, and you do it like a master with an art. And so just want to make sure that, at least from my perspective, your starting comment kind of shocked me a little bit. So,
No, thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Stuckey.
Yeah, I like your approach of working with people as opposed to just dropping the hammer right away. I do have a question or two. You mentioned that they're given 10 days to respond to your initial notice. How long are they given? Because they don't have to fix the violation in 10 days. But how long, if I'm giving you information, how long do I have to fix the violation if I tell you I'm going to do it in the future? Or is it case by case?
Have you ever heard the term, it depends on the situation?
I figured that was the answer, yes.
Okay. If it's a matter of public safety or public health, the time frame becomes tighter. But as long as I'm hearing a plan that will fix the violation in a reasonable time frame, the 10 is just an arbitrary figure that we start with. And And after that, it's as long as I'm seeing progress and I get the feeling that the responsible party is working in good faith towards resolution, I can be patient. There are some that have taken way in excess of 10 days, or 10 weeks, or 10 months. You know, and it depends on how critical it is, and who's affected by it or how. So it's flexible. It's just a number to start with.
So do you, if you don't see progress or you're not being updated, do you give a little nudge
If I
then?
don't see progress, then I'm not their friend.
Fair enough. And then my other question is, as far as being proactive, and this may be a question for Chief as well, do you think your position should be more proactive? I mean, if there was, I mean, I understand maybe for you, but if there was somebody that was full-time, do you think it should be a proactive?
I don't see a problem with that. I do think that if a jurisdiction wants to embark on proactive code enforcement, they need to make sure that their code enforcement officers are tactful and understand that they are public servants and not the Gestapo.
There's definitely a balance. I mean, a lot of times neighbors don't want to be the one to narc on their fellow neighbor and would just hope someone drives by randomly and lets them know about the issue. But I do see, to your point, you don't want to every single little thing be going after.
It's a fine balance, and you have to have a feel for what you're getting back from the responsible party, whether you have to start being firm or whether you consider whether you can continue to be friendly.
Sure.
I don't want to say I become unfriendly, but I can become firm.
Fair enough. Chief, how do you feel about proactive in that role?
I think that a lot of our job in either in code enforcement or at the police department is wanting to prevent problems, right? So I think having a proactive approach is always a positive thing. I think one of the concerns, and this is probably a conversation with Hillary, is if there's a safety concern that you're waiting for somebody to make a complaint about, but you see it, you should probably take that proactive approach. I think Ray does those things because there's always a liability for the city if it's a known safety problem. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Stuckey. Councilmember Romero.
Yes, I was not concerned. I was just mindful of the behavior of humans. Is that if somebody quote gets away with something, then word gets around, then somebody else says, "Well, it must be changed. I mean, I can do the same thing," and then it's kind of snowballs, so that you have whole neighborhoods for potentially copycatting one another because there's no repercussions. And I was going to just simply ask, is there any way that you approach a kind of a systematic development of violations or coding
I
violations?
have a policy. If I am investigating a complaint and making contact with the responsible party, I make myself aware of anything within a reasonable distance of that site that is a similar violation. And I get proactive on them. So I do try to keep from situations developing where somebody can get the feeling that they're being singled out and somebody else is being allowed to get away with something.
Thank
And
you.
I do, if I see something that I find important as far as public health or public safety or even quality of life on a higher plane, I will go ahead and initiate action because if I see it, then obviously other people can see it too. So, it's kind of a move in that direction to the best of my ability.
Thank you, Councilmember Romero. Anybody else?
Mayor Pro Tem has her hand raised.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Hi there, thank you. I'm I think that there are pros and cons to the complaint-driven system. A lot of these code things are, I'm not, cosmetic maybe for lack of a better word. And so if something isn't actually, if someone's boat parked out, in front of their house isn't bothering anybody, then is it worth the effort to try to enforce it? But as soon as it does bother someone and they complain, then it makes sense to address it. But I understand that there are cases that involve actual, safety. So I appreciate the fact that there is flexibility built into the system, and so that Ray can use his judgment in terms of, what needs to be prioritized and what doesn't. So I'm currently okay with the fact that our system is complaint driven. I do think that we can advertise that a little more, make the complaint form easier to find. It's right there on our website. But it's easy for me to find because I know it's there. So maybe we could do maybe some better outreach in terms of, hey, if this truck that's been parked there for 4 years is bothering you, this is the form that you can fill out to let us know. And in the complaint-driven system brings me to one unintended consequence, and that is whether or not that system can be abused. I don't know if that is a thing, Ray, but if I have hypothetically a nightmare neighbor who decides that a great way to harass me is to submit a complaint every time my lawn is, an inch taller than it's supposed to be, or whatever. How do you deal with that situation, or is that even a thing?
I have a section in this procedure manual specifically saying, try to avoid being drawn into neighborhood disputes. It is a possibility that code enforcement could be used as a weapon against feuding neighbors. And that is a topic that all code enforcement tries to kind of avoid. Sometimes it's hard to do if a person makes a valid complaint of a code violation by a neighbor, then it has to be dealt with. But I do try to avoid an obvious situation where it's just a vendetta. There are some situations like property line disputes that we just frankly refuse to get involved in. But I can see where you see that as a concern, and it is something that we do try to avoid. Does that address your issue, Tara?
It does, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. Anybody else? Councilmember Arms, I can't see you. Yes, Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Ray, I just want to say I appreciate the presentation and the kind of the clarification on how the process works and where some of the responsibilities lie. There's been a fair amount of discussion on this topic recently, and just kind of knowing how the process works and how you go about doing the job, I appreciate what you do. And so thank you for the clarification today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Marshall. Councilmember Wittgenstein.
Mr. House, I just want to thank you for all your years of service prior to coming to the city as a law enforcement officer. I believe it was Island County there for a while as well. In my world, I've known you for a lot of years prior to coming to the city. Just happy to see you're still here helping us develop this area that we haven't really had any enforcement in previously and as we grow. So again, thank you for your years of service.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wittgenstein. David, did you have anything you wanted to add to the presentation or discussion, or are you just here for moral support?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
Next part of our presentation today is fences. This is the planning side of the house. Due to recent discussions about fences, we've researched current code regarding fences within our code, as well as other municipalities. We wanted to find out what their fence rules were, to see how we compared. And so we've got some potential options today to discuss for council, to get direction on what you would like to see. So the fence height comparisons we found were Bellingham allows 6-foot fences, Mount Vernon is 6 feet, Anacortes is 7 feet, and we are told that Anacortes raised their fences from 6 to 7 because deer have a tendency to get over 6-foot high fences, but apparently a 7-foot high fence is not something they'll do.
Their jumping skills are done.
So Seattle is 6 feet. This is just a wide swath of places I chose. Pierce County is 6 feet. Skagit County is 6 feet. We are 6 feet. The current regulations are 6 feet here in town in the residential areas, and you can go up to 8 feet in commercial areas. What we could think about doing is an option to allow fences to go from 6 to 7 feet, if that's something that you're interested in. The other option would be to go above 7 feet, but then that triggers the building code for 7-foot high fences above 7 feet. So that would trigger a whole lot more review. We've been looking into that whole aspect. I asked the staff if they had any concerns about 7-foot high fences, and one of the staff's concern was, well, can you see over a 7-foot high fence? Could the police department see over a 7-foot high fence easily? And so I asked Mr. Helsley, I mean, has he ever run into that issue before when he was a police officer?
Oh, you're gonna go there.
So he said, well, you know, he only had that happen twice in his career, where he went out on private property and tried to get over a fence. So the first time he got up on the fence and he got over. The second time he got up on the fence and it collapsed. So the running joke in the police department for years was, Ray Helsley doesn't go over fences, he goes through them. So it's a different situation. I asked the police chief, and he said, you know, technically it's not what you should be doing is running onto private property. They use ladders and drones and other techniques to be able to see over a fence. Ray said it's not like you see on TV where people are jumping over fences and jumping from buildings to buildings. It just doesn't work that way. So if you did go with a 7-foot high, above 7-foot fence, there's a lot of permitting factors that would play into this. The location of a fence along a property line is something you have to figure out if you're going to be issuing a permit. And so how do you do that? So do we require a survey be done every time a property owner wants to put up a fence? And I don't remember how much it costs to do a survey, but I suppose it's over $1,000 to do something like that. Or do you have a process where somebody wants to put up a fence, get a permit, and then sign a disclaimer that says, well, I agree that I'm building this fence and I will designate that it's on my property, and if it's not, I will agree to move it. So you're getting into some complications if you start issuing permits for fences. Right now, it's a free kind of a process where you come in, you just build your fence, it's 6 feet high, and nobody says anything. The other problem we have with 7-foot high fences is there's a lot of time involved for inspectors to go out and inspect fences. They'd have to process permit applications, approve them. There would be cost for the people processing a fence. There'd be cost for the city to process. We would have to do software enhancements in our land management system. And so there's just a whole lot more that would be added to it if we went down this path to get taller fences by permit. So I think what our recommendation is, if you considered either a 6-foot high fence or a 6 to 7 without permits, would be the best of both worlds. One thing we also intend to do, after you decide where we're going, we'd like to work with our communications officer and come up with some communications around fence requirements. Maybe a one-page description of our process to hand out at displays and development services. Maybe go onto our website and add fence requirements on the web page so that people know what they're getting into. There's other code changes, though this gives us a chance to talk about those. Other code changes that we have in mind, and those are those that regulate side yard fences. So currently, we are required to require fences to be set back 10 feet from a side property line. So if you want to picture, you're standing in front of a house in the street, and you're looking at the front door, and off to the right's your garage, and if you look off to the left, there's another street coming up the side. That's known as a corner lot. And so if you walk up towards the house and turn left and go down the sidewalk, then get to the corner and turn right, start heading down that other street, down the sidewalk, we view it as coming up to a place where a fence could be next to the sidewalk. So you have the street, the curb, the boulevard, the sidewalk, and then a fence. We view that as the future path to use. Currently, you're required to put that fence 10 feet further towards the house. And so you're limiting somebody's side yard capability. They wouldn't have much side yard to use because that fence would be set closer to their house. So we believe the fence really should be down by the property line where the right-of-way line is. The benefit of that is if you have a fence that's 10 foot closer to the house, maybe you're renting the house and somebody rents it, and they don't know what they have. They mow their yard up to the fence, but then there's this no man's land that's created between the sidewalk and the fence that nobody's going to maintain. The city's not going to maintain it. There's not an HOA that's going to maintain it. Only the property owner is required to maintain it if he knows about it. So we really believe that changing the code to get rid of the requirement to have a 10-foot setback on fences on the side, on corner lots only, will be a benefit to people who live on corner lots. So that's something I'm here to get your feedback on, and certainly anything else you have to say today. Back to Ray's topic, we believe we don't do proactive enforcement, and fences that do not comply currently with the code require a complaint to be filed. Next step, after council provides feedback to us today, staff will review the code language and return with a proposal regarding fence height regulations, as well as any modification that you see necessary to change the location on corner lots. So we are available for any questions you may have.
Mayor Pro Tem has her hand raised.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, David. Is there a minimum height for fences?
I'm not aware of a minimum height for fences. Typically, in the front yard, 3 feet is an acceptable height, particularly on corner lots, so that you can see across a corner and to see cars coming up on the other street.
Okay, and in terms of, you know, anything but a corner lot, I get the visibility argument, but why do we restrict fence height at all? Like, why does that rule exist?
Well, the first reason is over 7 feet, it requires a building permit. Typically, at 6 feet, I think you can maybe see over your fence. If you're 6'4", you can walk along and see over a fence. If you're a little shorter than that, then you can't really see over the fence. But you can maybe get up on your tiptoes or whatever, for whatever reason. I think it's designed so you have some privacy from what's going on next door. Let's say you have a hot tub in your backyard and you'd like some privacy. 6 feet seems to be a standard nationwide that is a minimum or a maximum that people tend to use.
Okay, that seems really arbitrary to me. Just my opinion. I appreciated the rationale for Anacortes increasing their maximum height, because I used to have an escape artist dog who easily cleared my 6-foot fence, easily. And, I was trying to put trellises and all kinds of stuff, over it just to keep him in. But, having the option to do something a little extra really would have made my life a lot easier at the time. So, and that 10-foot setback for corner side fences, that's gotta go. That's, people can't use 10 feet of their own property. So I think that our ordinance absolutely it needs to have another look. I would, I would support eliminating that 10-foot setback and increasing from 6 feet to 7. That, because 6 feet just seems totally arbitrary to me anyway. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Romero.
And these brought up some interesting topics with regard to fences and deer. So there wasn't really a proliferation of deer 10 years ago or more in the city, but it's getting to be more and more that way. And I hear enough complaints about people's gardens being eaten and other things like that, that there might be a strong basis for making a 7-foot limit because of the deer. But then I started thinking about elk. I guess we have one elk on the island, I've been told, but I don't think that's an issue. And then with regard to the 10-foot setback, we're talking about trying to increase the density of housing, and we got this space, so I think the 10-foot setback is just completely not rational, and get rid of it. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Romero. Councilmember Arms.
Where we live, would have been nice to have 7 feet, because I can go in my laundry room and look at the neighbor's house across, because it's the way, we have a flagship, what they call flagship house. And so, I think having a higher fence would give a little more privacy. That's how I feel. It's like, what can we plant in front of that to, give us some privacy? They can look into our house, we can look into theirs. And, and the neighbors in the back, it's the same way. We don't have any privacy, or the side yards. The one side yard is okay, but the one definitely isn't. But I think, the 10-foot regulation on the corner, people want what they want, and I don't think we should obstruct that. And I think as far as fence increasing, because I would have liked to have a taller fence, because otherwise I have to plant everything and anything to have some privacy in my house. So that's how I feel.
Thank you, Councilmember Arms. Councilmember Stuckey.
Are there any RCWs regarding fencing? Is there anything from the state?
There are national codes, the I codes, and that's the most stringent code we have.
Which is 6 feet.
7 feet.
7 feet. What is, and maybe you glance, maybe I heard, what is the opinion of Development Services of what we should do as staff?
Well, my opinion is 6 feet's fine. It works great, and it doesn't cause any problems for us. If you want to go to 7 feet, you wouldn't have an objection from us, as long as there's no permit required. It's once you get over 7 feet, that triggers the permit requirement, and we would rather not do that. So we can live with anything between 6 and 7.
Well, it seems like most of the cities you listed choose 6 feet. Is it fair to say that 6 feet is the most common by far?
I would say you're correct. 6 feet's common. I do stand corrected, though. There is a minimum height requirement if you're around a swimming pool. So you're required to have at least a 5-foot high barrier around a swimming pool with a lock that's 60 inches off the ground. But that doesn't apply here, but it's just more information for you.
Okay. And the county is 7 feet, correct?
I'm not aware of a county being 7 feet, just the city of Anacortes.
The county, there is no limit on fence height? I thought it was set, and the reason I ask is I asked a couple of fencing companies, and they brought to my attention what the county is, and I'm just trusting that what they told me is correct. I mean, on the one hand, I understand if I'm a private citizen and I'm putting in a fence, I trust the fencing company to give me the accurate fence height. I'm not going to have the codes member. I mean, as a council member, I understand it's a little different, but as an average citizen, you know, you kind of trust the fencing company to have the correct height. And I do know that we have multiple homes here that likely have fences over 6 feet that just haven't had complaints. I mean, it's fair to assume. I don't know how many, but I'm sure there's other. But, I mean, let's acknowledge we're also in a little bit of an awkward situation with controversy or whatever you want to call it regarding the fencing. And while I might consider increasing the height to 7 feet, I would have a hard time voting for it right now. I think this is a better discussion for a year from now when it comes to fencing height than right now, because as we've mentioned before, optics, I don't like the look of it. I would prefer to wait to bring that item. As far as the corner lots, I'm all for that, but the fence height, I don't think right now is the time. I know it's just a workshop, we're just discussing it, but I would have a hard time voting for changing the fence height right now in the next month or two if this was brought to City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Stuckey. Councilmember Mero, but before I call on you again, let me make sure nobody else that hasn't had a chance to talk has. Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you. How many complaints have we had filed about fence heights over the years? I'm not trying to put you on the spot, just a generality.
I went through my records and found three
In the years?
in 6 years. My records will go back 6 years. All the records before that have been eliminated to open up the storage space. But in that 6 years, I've had 3 complaints of overheight fences. One of them was unfounded. The complainant had just estimated the height of the fence and hadn't actually measured it. And the other 2 were valid complaints. I think the 2022 was the valid one, and then the mayor's fence.
Okay, thank you for that. And Mr. Cool, again, your recommendation from planning?
Mr. Wiesner, my recommendation, first choice is 6 feet. I think an option to go from 6 to 7 is okay. And then recommendation to go over 7 is definitely a no.
Okay. So that recommendation from your department slightly changed over a period of time a little bit?
As you look at it, knowing that there'd be no permit required for a 6 to 7 foot high fence, and keeping it in such that it's freedom to put your fence where you want, I think that's probably a reasonable approach.
I guess the concern I have is, the reality is, it seems like we're discussing a problem that's not a problem. I mean, it doesn't seem like this is coming from code enforcement as a problem. Correct me if I'm wrong through any of this. It doesn't necessarily sound like it's coming from planning as a problem. I'm not aware of this being brought forward as a complaint from citizens, hey, we don't like the 6 foot fence rule, we need to have taller fences because we've got deer entering our yards and our gardens, and you know, I'm all about fixing problems, right? But I don't know that I'm all for going along. I mean, if we start just changing every code in our book because we want to change codes, and I guess I don't understand why we're having the discussion. So, any enlightenment that you can give me? I think we have a lot of other codes that we have that we need to be discussing. In other words, I guess is where I'm coming from.
We do, and thank you for that. A lot of housing codes to deal with and other things to change. When this whole issue came about, all the mayor said was he asked us to look into it. He didn't direct us to process a code change or do any of that. He just said, hey, can you look into it? And that's all we've done is look
Okay,
into it.
understood. Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I do appreciate that, Mr. Cool. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wiesner. Councilmember Wittgenstein.
Yeah, I'm kind of in with Councilmember Stuckey. I think on the height one, I think the timing's not appropriate. I wouldn't want to go down that until current stuff is fixed, finalized, and dealt with, and whatnot. I do agree with everybody on the 10-foot setback. That seems pretty ridiculous to me. When I was reading that, I was like, oh, wow, that makes no sense. So be willing to address that as well. My preference would we address it all at one time when the time's right, so that we don't cause extra work for staff.
Councilmember Marshall, did you have something? Otherwise, I have Mayor Pro Tem wants to speak again.
No,
And so
Mayor, I appreciate it. I'm with Councilmember Wittgenstein on this one, and I think that when we look at the setbacks, I agree the setbacks is an issue, but if the height wasn't an issue prior to this issue, then the height's really not much of an issue in my opinion. And I'd like to see it go through the proper channels that we normally would take a code change through. You know, I feel like we've kind of skipped a step and jumped right to council as opposed to taking it through the planning commission and the proper steps that we would normally do with any kind of other kind of development code changes. And so if we're going to investigate that as an option, then I think that we take it through that process first of taking it through the planning commission, getting their feedback, getting their recommendation. And so I guess my question to Ray is, even if we were to change the code, you already have a complaint filed, right? Does that then abate that complaint, or does that have, because it's already based upon current code, there's a current complaint filed, it's been found to be valid, from what I understand, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so even if we were to change the code now, that doesn't abate the issue, right? The issue
No,
still has to
there
be.
still has been a violation.
Okay,
It's a valid violation.
okay, okay. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you so much. Sorry that I'm still getting to know the new meeting format with the hand raising function. First, I think that there's a big difference between, in terms of whether or not this is a problem, there's a big difference between someone complaining about someone else's fence and someone wishing they could have a taller fence, personally. I mean, that's, like, there's no mechanism for submitting a complaint because my dog keeps jumping over the fence and I want to be able to go higher, if that makes sense. I mean, those are just two totally different things. I think that if we were to change the ordinance, that a lot of people would take advantage of that. I also think if this is, and I didn't hear anybody suggest that we bypass the planning commission. I mean, I'm assuming that this would all go through the usual regular process. It's only here in front of us today because council's expressed an interest in it. So, I'm just making that assumption. I assume it would also go through the planning commission. No one can really articulate a good enough reason for the difference between 6 and 7 feet, other than we've always done it that way, or everybody else does it that way. I mean, if it's arbitrary anyway, then I just don't see what difference it makes. And I certainly understand that some might have concerns, because if we do change this, that might benefit a particular person. But if we don't change this, that would penalize a particular person or people. We have gotten, just this afternoon, we got another complaint about someone else's fence that's too high. So to me, it doesn't make sense to go to a citizen and say, you need to incur the expense of remedying this situation, knowing that we're going to have a conversation about changing that guideline anyway. I mean, that is just jerking people around, and for absolutely no good reason. So that's, I don't think it makes sense to wait just to avoid the appearance of someone maybe benefiting when that person is already offered and been more than willing to mitigate the problem. If if it's not that much of a problem, then it's not a problem. You know, council just passed an entire from scratch ordinance about the utility vehicles, driving those around town, just because there were, I think, 3 or 4 people who had said vehicles and asked to be able to drive them on city limits. So it's not unprecedented that a handful of people would want us to go back and look at the way we do things and tweak it here and there. I mean, there's a big difference between developing an entirely new ordinance out of thin air versus just literally changing a number, you know, redlining and changing a single number in an existing ordinance. That's not super staff intensive, I don't think. So that's, yeah, I would support re-examining this. I certainly understand that some people might be concerned about the appearance, but, you know, someone is going to benefit either way. So, I mean, just what's in the interest of the greater good. That's just me thinking out loud. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Merrill.
I try to be on the practical side of things, and with regard to fence heights, burglaries, I'm quite aware of what a foot race trying to catch a burglar is like with a 6-foot fence versus a 7-foot fence and an 8-foot fence. So I'm kind of smiling that there's that point about the very same thing that increases privacy also makes law enforcement tougher. But in practical terms, you know, people have their own private property, and many of them would have a privacy fence exactly for that reason. And consequently, they may want a higher fence than is common. But are we not trying to make higher density housing too? And one of the big issues is privacy. So I'm just voicing this as potential issues or things to consider. And then finally, I would like to say that I'm in agreement with Mayor Pro Tem Heisen, Councilors Marshall, Wittgenstein, and Stuckey, and anybody else who thinks that we need to think this through and move on it a little later. But it does need to consider all the different factors. That's all I'm saying in this. A 7-foot would not be out of range, in my opinion.
Thank you, Councilmember Merrill. Anybody else? Yes, Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. And just for your convenience, Mr. Kula, because I have a computer in front of me, I did look up Island County Code on this because I think it does become a factor, right? Because otherwise, we start creating these islands. Well, here you can do this, here you can't do that, you know, right? 19.46.050 is the county code for fences and hedges. And it states fence and hedge limits in the various zones as follows. Residential zone, front yard 3 feet, side yard 6 feet, rear yard 6 feet. So that's Island County's regulation involving fences and hedges. And that does not, no permit required for fences as long as there's that restriction. Industrial zones, however, do go up to 8 feet in industrial zones. Commercial zones, however, are also 6 feet. So just I'd share that with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stuckey.
Yeah, if you could look into a little bit more, I hear what Jim's saying, but, you know, because I thought it was 7 feet based on information I was given from a fencing company, but I do like the idea of, you know, if they are 6 feet, it does make it a little easier for people to all be the same, because like next to me, I go 12 houses down, I'm in county. I go 15 houses down, I'm back in city, so it can make things a little interesting, but I thought it was 7 feet, but clearly if you're reading it, it's 6, so, thank you.
All right, anybody else for the good of the order? Thank you very much for your presentation. We're going to move forward to the 2025 comprehensive plan. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, you said that Tim needs 2 minutes for a technical issue? Oh, okay. So the 2025 comprehensive plan periodic update, introducing this today is our principal planner, Kat Kmek.
Right, sorry. Can you hear me now? Okay, I'll start again. All right, I'll have a brief presentation to provide an update on the 2025 comprehensive plan update process. The presentation is going to focus on a couple of memos that have been included in the packet. The two memos focus on climate-related resiliency analysis that our consultant is doing for us. So I will jump into a brief presentation. I will cover the topics as fast as I can and then have questions and answers. And if we need more time and more detail, we can also have the consultants come at the next meeting as well. So they are available if we have questions that and issues that we can't address at this moment. So we just wanted to start this discussion because there are other things that are in a slower process right now. So I'll go to my presentation. Again, these are the two memos that have been provided to the council with the packet. This was just what was included in the packet. I was going to stop there and just go with questions and discussion, but I thought I'll jump into it a little bit so that people who do not have access to these memos know at least what we're talking about. So the climate change element is a new element that we're considering as part of an update. It came as part of House Bill 1181. The city got a Department of Commerce grant to review this aspect of the inclusion into our comprehensive plan. And basically what it says is that we need to include climate resiliency into our comprehensive plan. And there's a couple parameters on how we do it. It needs to be equitably enhance resilience. And we need to avoid or substantially reduce any of the impacts that we identify. It's viewed as a guidance to help local jurisdiction use climate modeling to identify and prepare for natural hazards exacerbated by climate change, which includes stuff like floods, droughts, wildfires, and other impacts of changes to temperature and precipitation patterns. So what do the memos do for us? What are they summarizing? Of all the different type of hazards that impact or cover, at least as per the analysis. Again, this is not anything that is finalized. This is just what some of the tools that are available for us, what the guidance tells us that we have to do in order to accommodate this into our comp plan. So we're following steps, but there's a lot of community input. There's a lot of things that can change this. So what the tools have identified is that Oak Harbor's, the hazards most relevant to Oak Harbor are extreme precipitation, flooding, and sea level rise. The second memo focuses a little bit on analyzing the different assets that the community has, and then they compare them or analyze them against the hazards that we've identified. And they look at it at different levels of sensitivity, adaptive capacity, the probability of a hazard happening, and the magnitude of it happening. And so they do all of this and they score them, and this results in a sort of a table that's provided in your document in terms of what hazard and what asset and what level of sensitivity that they have for this analysis. So with the general assets that have been identified so far, so they have, the consultants have looked at all our existing plans, and this is kind of what the analysis shows, is that what are our vulnerable assets, and I think we know this, NAS would be is our primary economic generator, and so we already have a lot of our policies included in our comprehensive plan to protect that asset, and the climate element is identifying this again as one of the priorities for Oak Harbor to do. And so there'll be a lot of policies that hopefully support more of how to keep NAS Whidbey and its operations here for the economy portion of it. Shoreline is another asset. That is an asset, but it's varied. We have the marina, we have Pioneer Way, we have Windjammer Park, we have private properties, we have bluffs. All of these are varied, and so these are things that we should look at and see what kind of policies we can have to keep them resilient in the long run. The wastewater treatment facility, again, sea level rise could potentially be an impact of that, so it's a vulnerable asset that we should continue to keep our eyes on. The city's water line from Anacortes, so that's a very important lifeline that supports the city and all of the development that we do here. That's what differentiates Oak Harbor from the rest of the island in terms of how we can accommodate population. And so we should make sure that we think about the long-term strategy to keep that water line functioning and providing the service that it is. And then there would be health medical facilities that were also identified as vulnerable assets, and to try and provide resiliency in providing services to the island. So these are just the initial ones that have been assessed through this analysis. I think I have one more slide, and we'll go back to questions. And I think there's some recommended actions that are coming up from these initial analysis. Again, this is not the full list. We'll probably have more, but this is just what has come up from the current tools that they have used. So there'll be some update to development standards to try and strengthen or try and add more resiliency to our developments as we move forward. We'll have to update primary evacuation routes and other plans that relate to that. Again, they've looked at NAS Whidbey and recommended strengthening the emergency action plan that relates to the installation. Update the emergency water supply plan for Oak Harbor as well. I think the water system plan needs an update following the comprehensive plan, and looking at it from a climate resiliency standpoint will provide maybe solutions differently. So that's something that we should look at. Again, we should study the shoreline based on the different types of development and the profile of the shoreline that we have. And then we should also update the water system plan and make sure we have long-term plans for our sewer treatment plant if it's going to be impacted by any sea level rise. So these are things that have come out so far from these memos. These are very much in draft form. We're continuing to work with the consultants. They'll be doing some additional work and analysis on this as we go through our community engagement effort. Our second survey is yet to come. So there's more that will come from here. The Oak Pack has met only once, and we have a plan for at least 3 or 4 meetings. So in 2025, we'll probably meet with them. Most of the schedule has been, for the comprehensive plan, has slid a little bit, and I think council is aware that we're working with Island County in terms of UGA and the housing allocation. And to give you a quick update on that, staff is working with their staff. We are seeing how the UGA is developed very differently from the county perspective and from a city perspective. And I think this kind of requires maybe some discussion and mediation. And so we've reached out to the state, and the state is going to mediate between Island County and the city. And as I mentioned, I think when we started this process, we want to be continually learning as we go through this. Some of these challenges are new. So we've kind of stuck to that. We're not trying to be rigid, trying to be open and learn from it as we move forward. We're looking for common ground, because I think doing things separately or not coordinated doesn't do good for our citizens as a whole. So we're trying to do our best, but that's kind of on a little slower track in our schedule. So we're going to move some of these climate-related discussions forward, and hopefully in the next month or so, with the joint meeting with the county we'll be able to find some common ground and find direction to move forward. So this is just the update on the two memos that we're kind of looking at right now. And with that, I will turn it back to the council for questions or comments or any discussions.
Kat, and before I ask council for their questions or comments, you have had all your meetings with all the council members at this point regarding the...
I have, I think, yes.
Okay, great. So with that, council, do you have any questions or comments for Kat? Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Kak, I was just looking at, the chart that they used in here for the asset vulnerability, and I just had a couple of comments on it, and you actually identified them, but I just want to make sure we're on the same page. This is in the Kimberly Horn report, where they were determining which assets were more vulnerable to flooding, rainfall, and sea level rise. And of course, sea level rise, they made a note in the deal that they acknowledge that our sewage treatment plant is, close to sea level, right? And of course, I guess that is triggering for us to all have the knowledge and be on the same page that sea level rise and our sewage treatment plant would not be friends to each other. The Kimberly Horn report, grade that area out because not enough data in their models, but they made a note, below that they acknowledge that. So I want to make sure that we have a big red flag there, right? And even though it's not red on this chart, it's a big red flag there.
Absolutely, and I made that very exact comment in my discussions with them as we update these memos and kind of finalize things. I said, I need some kind of statement there. I know there's a lot of data, but we still need to kind of say what that means because it's quite obvious.
Thank you. Yes, that was my question to them, and sorry about that. Yes, that was my question to them, and as well, and so they're working on it. We're trying to find ways to make sure that even though it's gray, that we identify it as a risk and take measures or policies, considerations to include that, absolutely.
Yeah, and another one that kind of surprised me, and maybe you have an explanation, maybe you don't, because, we're not environmental climatologists. That's why we hired these folks. But I found it interesting that the marine shoreline was at high risk for extreme precipitation and flooding, but at lower risk for sea level rise. And I would have thought that our marine shoreline that especially with what we've got going on down at City Beach, right? We know the damage, some of these king tides have done. Now imagine a king tide combined with a sea level rise. What would that do to our shoreline? And they have that actually marked on their chart as yellow versus red. And the red is noted for extreme precipitation and flooding for shoreline. So maybe we can get kind of a feel for that from them.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that I brought up to them as well, and we'll get more clarification on that, because, the marina was identified as somehow in a flood, at a high hazard flood, but sea level rise didn't have anything in it. Absolutely.
And the final thing I noted, and I just want you to realize, I actually do look at all this stuff, right? And I appreciate the fact that you've digested it too, and I know you have, and just want to let you know that at least you and I are on the same page. And water supply, I found that intriguing, that they're concerned about saltwater intrusion with sea level rise with our wells, considering they're not in an area, at least not that I know of, that it has been identified by Island County as a risk for high water, saltwater intrusion. And I realize sea level rise may change all of that, but I guess in my mind, water supply is important, right? But I'd be more concerned about extreme precipitation, taking out the pipelines, with mudslides between here and our water source, I think, than I would be that our backup wells would be, getting flooded with saltwater intrusion due to sea level rise. So I'm hoping that we're, not putting a lot of emphasis on that, and we're, putting more emphasis on understanding that, those wells are going to be integral if, in fact, we have a major episode on the mainland that takes out our pipeline. I'd hate to see us, going through a ton of efforts to prevent saltwater intrusion when we should be going through all the efforts to protect our existing pipeline and, not have to find a use for those wells.
Absolutely. We'll definitely see, these policies, I think suggestions from a kind of a tool set. And so we'll probably refine those as we go. But I did notice that we do need to include some of these policies in our water system plan because we need to also find a way to increase our water storage capacity. Currently, our water system plan may be dealing with efficiency and maybe looking at things differently. But when we look at things with the resiliency, there may be some redundancy we may have to build into the system, and we need to plan for those. So there may be some shifts, and so we have already started our conversation with the Public Works Department, and kind of going to be looking at how to respond to some of these comments that have come from our climate consultants. So this is still a back and forth, and you're bringing up some great comments. We've identified some of these, and we're going to be talking to them as well. What you see eventually that will come forward as policies, I think will be different than what you're seeing right now.
Thank you, Kak.
Thanks, Kak. Anybody else for the good of the order? All right, hearing nothing, we are going to take a 5-minute break because we have some technology issues we need to address. So we will be back at 2:26. So it's 2:29. We're going to call this meeting back to order. We're going to move on with design regulations and guidelines update, and here to introduce that is our senior planner, Ray Lindenberg.
Members of the City Council, thank you. This is a kind of continuation from something that was started a couple of years ago, honestly, and so we wanted to update you on kind of the process with it and the reasoning behind what we're doing here. This can be considered kind of a stopgap measure, to be perfectly honest. When we go through our process by which we eventually adopt a form-based code, some of this may not be necessary, but it is necessary right now because of some changes we made to the code in the past. When we reduced the minimum lot sizes down to 3,200 square feet, we essentially made it so that folks don't have to really go through the PRD process anymore to get those smaller lots. And in the PRD process, we had the ability to, as the city, review design criteria and design standards for single-family homes.
Ray, can you hang on one second? Sure. Hillary, you have your hand up?
We just couldn't hear for the first part, but someone let us back in, so we're good. Thanks.
Okay. Go ahead, Ray. Sorry.
So, and then a couple things happened between now and then also. We had the House Bill 1110, which mandated requirements for development standards for multifamily projects could not be more restrictive than those for single family. So in order to even those out, we essentially needed to create design standards for single family homes because we already had them for multifamily projects. I do want to apologize. The attachment 1 that I have referenced in my agenda bill here is not correct. It is a working copy, and you probably saw that it was kind of awkward and weird and had some notes in it, so ignore that. If you want to see what the existing is, it is available on our website as just the design regulations and guidelines, and essentially as you scroll through that, if I can get to page 24 on there, whoever's sharing that. When you look at the existing document now, there is a section that talks about multifamily housing. Sorry, 29. No, that was my fault. There is a section that talks about residential design, and is that attachment 2 or attachment 1? Okay, yeah, thank you. Attachment 1, which is the existing one, just has multifamily residential reference, and it goes through and talks about different categories within multifamily residential. This new version, essentially what we did is we took it and we broke it into single family and multifamily. And again, we did that so that we can have the corresponding requirements in both of those so that our multifamily regulations are not more restrictive. And the reason that the state wanted us to do that is so that we can't arbitrarily kind of slow down or deny or cause, additional cost for multifamily, missing middle housing, et cetera. And the secondary issue with that is so we can also review some of the standards for single-family homes as we go through new subdivisions so that we have nice looking single-family neighborhoods as well as our multifamily areas. So that is just kind of the initial draft of this, the concept behind it, the reasoning behind it. I'm just here today to kind of bring you up to speed because I know we have some new members since the last time we talked about this. So we're going to be working through that and probably bringing it back to you in the next month or two, hopefully for adoption. Like I said, it is a stopgap measure until the point where we get to a form-based code. But until then, we're going to probably have some subdivisions that we want to be able to have a little bit of review over. So do you have any questions for me? I'm here to answer those.
Great, thank you, Ray. Any questions from council? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to zoning code amendments, and here to talk about that is our senior planner, Ray Lindenberg, with senior planner Dennis LaFear and associate planner Nolan Grunska.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council again. I'm trying to get to the correct page here, and this is a huge document. I apologize. We'll just go ahead and go off of that, if we can do that. So we have a number of code amendments that we're kind of packaging all together here as a housekeeping type amendment package. If we could go to the next page, please. Oh, I do. Sorry. Thank you. Yes. Okay. So the first of those is going to be in section 1908, the definitions. We have two of those in the definitions section, and I'll kind of explain the justification or the rationale behind those. The first one is our definition of building line, and this was a request based on one of our local developers who wanted to include a fireplace on the side yard of his home. And that fireplace extended into the setback area. And based on our existing code, we did not allow for any projections into the setback except for those for eaves. And so we did some research, and the proponent of this particular project also did some research for us and pointed out that a couple of nearby jurisdictions allow for certain intrusions into the setback area. So what we did is we included, and we concur with that, it's a good idea, it's reasonable, that minor architectural features that include cornices, eaves, sills, fireplaces, chimneys and flues, open beams, trellises, up to 3 feet can project into the setback. Of those exemptions, only fireplaces, chimneys, and flues may extend to the finished grade. In other words, you can have your cornices and your open beams and trellises and things like that projecting out from the house to an eave or something along those lines. That's a true architectural feature. The fireplace, chimney, and flue can go down to the ground itself.